They mocked his trembling hands and called him weak. But when the cartel blocked the highway, Mac didn't hit the brakes. He aimed. Meet the ex-tank commander who turned an 18-wheeler into a missile. The air at the truck stop tasted like diesel fumes and stale coffee, a flavor Mac had lived with for 20 years. He stood by the massive grill of his 18-wheeler, a Peterbilt that had seen better decades. He was checking the lug nuts on the front tires, his movements slow and methodical. To an outsider, he looked like a relic, a man in his late 50s with a graying beard, a slight limp, and eyes that always seemed to be staring at something 1,000 yards away. His hands, rough as sandpaper, had a persistent, rhythmic tremor. Most people assumed it was the early onset of Parkinson's or the shakes of a recovering alcoholic. They were wrong. It was the body's memory of recoil. "Hey, old man, are we gonna sleep here or drive?" The voice cracked like a whip. It was Kevin, the logistics manager from corporate. Kevin was 25, wore a suit that cost more than Mac's truck, and had decided to ride along to audit efficiency. He viewed Mac as a liability, a dinosaur in the age of automated shipping. Kevin was leaning out the passenger window, tapping his expensive watch. "We're burning daylight, Mac. I have a schedule. Corporate has metrics. Try to keep up," Kevin sneered, rolling his eyes as Mac finished his inspection. Mac didn't answer. He never did. He just wiped his greasy hands on a rag, climbed into the cab, and fired up the engine. The beast roared to life, sending a vibration through the floorboards that usually comforted him. Today, however, something felt off. The route they were taking, the Devil's Spine Pass, was treacherous even on a sunny day. It was a narrow, winding ribbon of asphalt cut into the side of the mountains, with a sheer drop of 2,000 feet on one side and a wall of jagged rock on the other. As Mac merged onto the highway, Kevin wouldn't shut up. He critiqued Mac's shifting, his speed, and his silence. "You know, guys like you are on the way out," Kevin said, scrolling through his phone. "Autonomous trucks don't take bathroom breaks and they don't have whatever condition you have with your hands." Mac gripped the steering wheel tight, his knuckles white. The trembling stopped the moment he locked his fingers around the leather. He wasn't afraid of the road. He wasn't afraid of Kevin. He was practicing restraint. He was a contained explosion, a dormant war machine disguised as a blue-collar worker. He looked in the side mirror, watching the sun dip below the peaks. The shadows were getting long. The radio static hissed. And deep in his gut, the instinct that had kept him alive in the desert began to scream. The sun had vanished behind the jagged peaks of the Rockies, plunging the Devil's Spine Pass into a prematurely dark twilight. The only illumination came from the Peterbilt's high beams, cutting through the sudden soup-thick fog that clung to the asphalt. Mac shifted gears, the engine growling low and steady as they began the steep ascent toward the summit. Beside him, Kevin was mid-sentence, complaining about the lack of cell service, when the world suddenly tilted on its axis. It started with a flicker of brake lights ahead, not the normal red glow of traffic, but a chaotic strobe. Then the radio, which had been buzzing with static, went dead silent. No trucker chatter. No weather reports. Just a void. Finally, some quiet, Kevin muttered, oblivious. Mac narrowed his eyes. He saw it before Kevin did. 300 yards ahead, the road was blocked. Two blacked-out SUVs were parked sideways across both lanes, their headlights off, invisible until the last second. Behind them stood a massive timber truck, jackknifed intentionally to create an impassable wall. "Whoa, whoa! Watch out!" Kevin shrieked, dropping his phone. Mac didn't panic. He didn't slam the brakes. He feathered them, bringing the 80,000-pound rig to a controlled, hissing halt 50 yards from the blockade. "What is this? An accident?" Kevin asked, his voice trembling. "Honk at them. Tell them to move." Before Mac could respond, the doors of the SUVs swung open. 6 men stepped out. They weren't wearing road crew vests. They were clad in tactical gear, balaclavas, and carrying automatic rifles. This wasn't a traffic jam. It was a harvest. The Viper cartel had been hitting supply lines in this sector for months, hijacking high-value cargo and disappearing into the wilderness. Today, Mac's trailer was loaded with industrial-grade copper and steel, a payload worth nearly $1 million. Oh my God! Oh my God! Kevin hyperventilated, scrabbling at the door handle. I'm getting out. I'm telling them I'm just corporate. Stay inside, Mac said. His voice was different, deeper. It wasn't the mumble of an old trucker. It was the command of an officer. You don't tell me what to do. Kevin yelled, popping the lock. A single gunshot rang out. The side mirror on Kevin's side exploded into shards of glass and plastic. Kevin screamed and threw himself onto the floor of the cab, covering his head. They aren't here for the truck, kid, Mac said, scanning the perimeter, his eyes darting from the cliff edge to the rock wall. They're here to leave no witnesses. We're in the kill box. The trembling in Mac's hands was gone completely now. The adrenaline hit his system like high-octane fuel. He looked at the blockade, then at the rearview mirror. Headlights appeared behind them. They were boxed in. The trap was sealed tight. The headlights behind them belonged to a third SUV, effectively closing the pincer movement. Mac watched the rear monitor. 3 more gunmen were exiting the rear vehicle, moving with the casual confidence of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. The road was too narrow for a U-turn, and the drop-off to the right was a death sentence. We're dead. We're actually dead, Kevin whimpered from the floorboard, curling into a fetal position. I have a fiancé. I have a Tesla. This can't be happening. Quiet, Mac ordered. He wasn't looking at the gunman anymore. He was looking at the dashboard gauges. Air pressure, oil temperature, torque load. One of the gunmen from the front walked casually toward the truck, raising a megaphone. Driver, kill the engine. Step out with your hands up and we make this quick. Stay inside and we burn you out. Mac reached under his seat. He didn't pull out a shotgun or a pistol. He pulled out a heavy steel wrench and a roll of duct tape. He looked at Kevin. If you want to live, you need to become part of the seat. Strap yourself in. Tight. What? Are you surrendering? Kevin cried. Surrender is for civilians, Mac grunted. He locked the cabin doors and engaged the secondary locking mechanism, a manual deadbolt he had welded on himself years ago. He then reached up and flipped a row of switches that most drivers never touched. The differential lock. The engine fan override. Outside, the gunmen were getting impatient. The leader signaled. A burst of automatic fire raked across the grill of the truck, shattering the headlights and pinging off the heavy chrome bumper. Steam hissed from a punctured radiator hose, creating a cloud of white fog around the cab. They blinded us. We can't see. Kevin screamed. I don't need to see, Mac muttered. He closed his eyes for a split second, visualizing the terrain he had driven 1,000 times. He knew the gradient of the slope. He knew the friction coefficient of the asphalt in this humidity. The gunmen assumed the truck was disabled. They began to advance, walking right into the steam cloud, expecting a cowering old man to fall out of the cab. Inside, Mac's hand hovered over the gear stick. It wasn't just a stick shift to him anymore. It was the firing mechanism of a 60-ton land torpedo. Kevin, Mac said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Put your head between your knees. Why? Because we aren't stopping. Mac slammed the truck into a low gear, but instead of braking, he floored the accelerator. The massive diesel engine roared, a sound that wasn't a mechanical hum, but a war cry. The truck didn't lurch forward. It surged like a beast unchained. The physics of a fully loaded 18-wheeler are terrifying. 80,000 pounds of mass, once in motion, possesses a kinetic energy that rivals a locomotive. When Mac stomped on the accelerator, the laws of motion took over. The gunmen, who had been confidently walking through the steam, suddenly felt the ground vibrate beneath their boots. Mac wasn't driving a truck anymore. In his mind, the steering wheel was the yoke of an M1 Abrams tank. The windshield was his viewport. The hostile infantry was closing in, but they had made a fatal miscalculation. They assumed he was defensive. He's moving. Shoot the tires. The leader screamed over the roar of the engine. Bullets chewed into the rubber, but Mac ran on heavy-duty, run-flat mining tires. Expensive overkill that corporate hated, but Mac insisted on. They held. The truck lunged forward, gathering speed with terrifying rapidity due to the downhill grade. Mac, the blockade. You're gonna hit the blockade. Kevin shrieked, finally looking up. Not hit, Mac corrected, his eyes narrowing as he calculated the angle of impact. Breach. He didn't aim for the center of the jackknifed timber truck. That would be suicide. The impact would crumple the cab and kill them both. Instead, Mac aimed for the rear axle of the timber trailer, the pivot point. He needed to turn the enemy's barrier into a swinging door. Hold on, Mac roared. He jerked the wheel slightly to the left, aligning the Peterbilt's massive steel bull bar, a reinforced cage of tubular steel, with the target. Crunch. The sound was deafening. Metal screamed as it tore against metal. The impact wasn't a dead stop. It was a violent shove. The momentum of Mac's truck, combined with the precise angle of the hit, sheared the axle of the timber truck and spun the trailer violently to the side. It was simple physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. Mac had the mass. He had the acceleration. The timber truck spun out of the way, scraping along the cliff face, opening a gap just wide enough for the rig to squeeze through. Sparks showered the windshield like fireworks. The side mirror on Mac's side was ripped off by the grinding metal, but they were through. They burst out of the steam and debris, back onto the open road, accelerating downhill. You crazy son of a bitch. Kevin gasped, hyperventilating. You just rammed them. Who are you? Mac didn't answer. He was checking his mirrors. The blockade was broken, but the SUVs were turning around. They were lighter, faster, and they were angry. Check the cargo straps, Mac commanded, pointing to the sensors on the dash. If the load shifts, we roll over. Keep your eyes on that light. If it turns red, you tell me. Okay, Kevin stammered, terrified into obedience. The corporate manager was gone. He was now the loader, and Mac was the commander. The road ahead was a serpentine nightmare, a series of switchbacks descending sharply into the valley. Mac knew the terrain favored the pursuers. The SUVs could corner faster. They could brake harder. But Mac had the weight. On a downhill slope, gravity was his engine. They're coming up on the left. Kevin yelled, staring at the side mirror. A black SUV pulled alongside the cab, matching their speed at 70 miles per hour. The passenger window rolled down, and a gunman leaned out, an SMG pointed directly at Mac. Get down. Kevin ducked. Mac didn't flinch. He watched the gunman. He watched the gap between the truck and the SUV. He waited for the road to curve. The upcoming turn was a sharp bank to the right. The SUV was on the outside lane. Physics, Mac whispered. As they hit the curve, the SUV had to brake to maintain traction. Mac didn't brake. He let the trailer drift. It's a move called wagon tail, usually a fatal mistake for a rookie driver, causing a jackknife. But for an expert, it's a weapon. Mac twitched the wheel, sending a ripple of motion down the 53-foot trailer. The rear of the trailer swung out just a few feet, a calculated sway. Wham! The back corner of the heavy steel trailer clipped the front fender of the SUV. At 70 miles per hour, that tap was like being hit by a wrecking ball. The SUV lost traction instantly. It spun wildly out of control, tires screeching, before slamming violently into the rock wall on the left. It tumbled, flipping end over end in the rearview mirror until it was just a pile of twisted metal and dust. One down, Mac stated, his voice flat. Kevin stared at him, eyes wide. You did that with the trailer? You hit them with the trailer. The vehicle is the weapon, Kevin. Every inch of it, Mac said, shifting gears to manage the engine RPM. But they have two more. And the next ones won't get that close. Mac reached into the glove box and pulled out a CB radio handset. He knew the digital lines were jammed, but the old analog channels might bleed through if they were close enough. Breaker 19, this is Ironclad, Mac said into the mic, his voice dropping an octave into his old radio call sign. I have hostile pursuit on the spine. I am engaging. Any law enforcement listening, clear the road. I am not stopping. There was no answer, just static. But Mac wasn't asking for permission. He was stating a fact. He checked the air pressure gauge. He had used a lot of air on that maneuver. The brakes were getting hot. The smell of burning lining began to fill the cab. "Mac," Kevin said, pointing at the dashboard. "That light you told me to watch? The load sensor. It's blinking yellow." "That means the steel beams are loose," Mac said grimly. "If we corner too hard, they slide through the front of the trailer and decapitate us." "So we slow down?" "No," Mac said, watching the second SUV appear in the mirror. "We go faster. We need the centrifugal force to keep them pinned against the walls." The remaining pursuers had learned their lesson. They didn't pull alongside the cab anymore. Instead, the second SUV stayed directly behind the trailer, drafting in Mac's blind spot, while the third vehicle, a heavier armored tactical van, pulled out into the oncoming lane, keeping a safe distance but preparing to cut him off. Suddenly, a rhythmic thumping sound echoed through the chassis. "What is that?" Kevin asked, looking around frantically. "They're shooting the door hinges," Mac said. "They're trying to board." The SUV behind them had a sunroof open. A man was climbing out onto the hood of the moving car, preparing to leap onto the rear of the trailer. If they got inside the trailer, they could cut the airlines or detach the cab. Mac watched the monitor. The man jumped, catching the ladder on the back of the trailer. He was on. "We have a boarder," Mac announced. "Shake him off." Kevin yelled. "Can't. The load is loose. If I swerve, we die." Mac's mind raced. He needed to deal with the threat behind him without wrecking the truck. Then, the radio crackled. It wasn't help. It was the cartel leader. "Driver," a voice hissed, cold and digital. "You drive well. But you cannot drive forever. We have the bridge at the bottom rigged. You stop now, and I only kill the suit. You keep going and you both burn." Kevin went pale. "The bridge. Mac, the mile-high bridge. If they blow that—" "They won't blow it while we're on it," Mac said. "They want the cargo. It's a bluff." "Is it?" Kevin cried. "These guys are psychos." "Mac," the voice on the radio continued, "we know who you are. Sergeant McMillan. 3rd Armored Division. We pulled your file. You're a hero, right? A protector. Stop the truck, Sergeant. Don't make us kill the innocent people at the roadblock down the mountain." Mac's eyes hardened. They were using hostages now. They were escalating. This wasn't just a robbery anymore. It was a siege. "Kevin," Mac said, "open the glove box. Get the flare gun." "Flare gun? Why do we have a flare gun?" "Emergency kit. Get it." Kevin fumbled with the latch and pulled out the orange plastic pistol. "Okay, I got it. Now what?" "Roll down your window." "Are you crazy? They're shooting." "Do it." Mac barked. "The van in the left lane. It's armored, but it has air intakes. You fire that flare right at the grill. If the engine sucks in that magnesium, it'll melt the block." Kevin's hands were shaking, but he looked at Mac's steady profile, the jaw set like granite, the eyes focused. He took a breath. He rolled down the window. The wind roared into the cabin, deafening and cold. "Aim low," Mac shouted. Kevin leaned out. The armored van was right there, parallel to them. The gunman in the passenger seat raised his rifle. Kevin squeezed the trigger. The flare streaked out of the pistol, a brilliant ball of red fire. Kevin's aim was sloppy, driven by panic, but luck was on his side. The flare didn't hit the grill. It hit the pavement directly in front of the armored van. The magnesium burst into a blinding white-hot flower of sparks and smoke. The driver of the van, blinded by the sudden flash, jerked the wheel. The van swerved toward the cliff, corrected over hard, and slammed into the side of Mac's trailer. Bang! The impact shuddered through the rig. The van bounced off, tires shredded, and spun out, dropping far behind. But the collision had a consequence. "Mac, the light is red. The light is red." Kevin screamed, pointing at the load sensor. The impact had snapped the primary straps holding the 20 tons of steel beams. The cargo was now free-floating inside the trailer. "Hold on," Mac gritted his teeth. "We're coming up on the hairpin." The hairpin was the deadliest turn on the pass, a 180-degree switchback. With loose cargo, taking the turn at this speed would send the steel beams smashing through the side of the trailer, tipping the truck over the edge. But slowing down meant the boarder on the back, who was now climbing toward the front of the trailer, would get to the cab. Mac made a choice only a tank commander would make. He didn't slow down. He sped up. "What are you doing?" Kevin wailed. "To run," Mac muttered. "The battering ram." Mac looked at the guardrail on the inside of the turn. It was reinforced concrete. He steered the truck into the turn, but intentionally cut it too sharp. He drove the trailer's wheels into the drainage ditch on the inside of the curve. The truck tilted dangerously to the left. The loose steel beams inside the trailer slammed against the left wall. The wall facing the mountain, not the cliff. The massive weight of the steel acted as an anchor, pinning the tires to the ground just as the truck threatened to flip. Simultaneously, Mac slammed on the independent trailer brakes but kept the throttle floored. The trailer tires locked up, screeching and smoking, while the cab pulled forward. The trailer drifted sideways, grinding against the concrete barrier. The friction was immense. Sparks flew in a solid sheet. The man clinging to the side of the trailer screamed as the concrete wall scraped him off like a bug on a windshield. Mac fought the wheel, his muscles straining against the hydraulic resistance. The truck drifted through the 180-degree turn, the trailer acting as a counterweight, grinding the enemy boarder into dust and stabilizing the turn through sheer brute force. They exited the turn, smoke billowing from the tires, the trailer battered but still attached. You used the mountain," Kevin whispered, staring at Mac with awe. "You used the mountain to catch us." "Calculated risk," Mac exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. "But we're not done. The leader is still behind us. And we're out of brakes." The dashboard was lit up like a Christmas tree. Brake failure warning. High engine temp. Low oil pressure. The abuse Mac had put the Peterbilt through was taking its toll. The smell of burnt rubber was overpowering. Behind them, the final SUV, the leader's vehicle, was closing in. This one was different. It had a mounted machine gun on the roof rack. The cartel boss had decided to stop playing games. "He's lining up a shot." Kevin yelled. "Take the wheel," Mac said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "What?" "Take the wheel. Keep it steady. Don't touch the brakes, they're gone anyway. Just steer." Mac stood up in the shaking cab. The ceiling was low, but he maneuvered his bulk toward the sleeper berth behind the seats. There was a small skylight hatch in the roof of the sleeper. Mac popped the latch. "Mac, don't leave me," Kevin cried, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled terror. "Keep it straight, kid," Mac shouted over the wind. Mac pulled himself up through the hatch. The wind at 80 miles an hour was brutal, tearing at his clothes. He crawled onto the roof of the cab, his boots finding purchase on the rivets. He looked back. The SUV was 30 feet behind, the gunner adjusting his aim. The gunner saw Mac and grinned, swinging the barrel up. Mac didn't have a gun. He had the heavy steel tire iron he had tucked into his belt. But he wasn't going to throw it. He was waiting for the terrain. They were approaching a tunnel, the Black Rock Tunnel. The clearance was low. Mac lay flat on the roof, pressing himself against the metal. The gunner in the SUV stood tall, aiming. "Now!" Mac screamed, though Kevin couldn't hear him. The truck plunged into the tunnel. The sudden change in air pressure popped the ears. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the sparks from the truck's exhaust. The SUV followed. The gunner, focused on Mac, didn't look up. Thwack! The tunnel had a clearance bar and low hanging lights. The gunner, standing high in the sunroof, clipped the clearance sign at 80 miles per hour. He was swept backward out of the vehicle instantly. But the SUV driver kept coming. He rammed the back of the truck. Mac, still on the roof, crawled toward the airlines connecting the cab to the trailer. He reached down and grabbed the emergency release lever for the trailer. He waited until he saw the SUV's headlights directly under the rear bumper of the trailer. "Goodbye," Mac grunted. He yanked the lever. The locking jaws opened. The 53-foot trailer, loaded with 20 tons of loose steel, disconnected from the cab. Without the cab pulling it, and with the sudden loss of air pressure locking the brakes, the trailer became a stationary brick wall. The SUV, drafting inches behind it, had zero time to react. It plowed into the back of the trailer at full speed. The impact was cataclysmic. The SUV crumpled like a soda can, wedged under the massive steel frame. The wreckage skidded to a halt, blocking the tunnel completely. Mac's cab, now free of the weight, shot forward like a bullet. Mac almost slid off the roof but caught the air horn handle. He pulled himself back inside the hatch, dropping into the passenger seat, panting. What happened? I felt a bump. Kevin yelled. Dropped the payload, Mac wheezed, buckling back in. Mission accomplished. The cab, now light and bobtailing, sped out of the tunnel and into the valley floor. Blue and red lights flashed in the distance. A blockade of police cars and SWAT vehicles was set up across the road, spikes deployed. Mac tapped the brakes. Nothing. The pedal went to the floor. Mac. The police. We're gonna hit them. Kevin screamed. Engine brake, Mac said calmly. He downshifted aggressively. The engine screamed, the RPMs redlining. Jake, 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 Jake. The loud machine gun rattle of the compression release brake echoed off the valley walls. The truck slowed. 60, 50, 40. Mac steered toward the shoulder, aiming for a runaway truck ramp, a long pit of deep gravel designed to stop vehicles just like this. Brace. The cab hit the gravel. The violence of the stop threw them forward against their seatbelts. Dust exploded everywhere. Stones pelted the undercarriage. The truck bucked and heaved, digging deep into the stones, until finally, with a groan of settling metal, it stopped. Silence. Steam hissed from the engine. The smell of hot metal and adrenaline filled the small space. Mac sat back, his hands resting on the wheel. They were trembling again. Not from fear, but from the come-down. We're alive, Kevin whispered. He looked at Mac. The arrogance was gone. In its place was pure, unadulterated respect. You saved my life. Just doing the job, kid, Mac mumbled, reaching for his thermos. Outside, the SWAT team swarmed the truck, weapons drawn. Driver. Exit the vehicle. Hands up. Kevin kicked his door open. He stumbled out, raising his hands. Don't shoot. He's a hero. He's the only reason we're alive. The SWAT captain lowered his rifle as he saw the battered cab, the bullet holes, the missing trailer. He approached the driver's side. Mac opened the door slowly and stepped down. He looked like a wreck, oil on his face, shirt torn, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. The captain looked at Mac, then at the tactical movement of the man, the way he scanned the perimeter even now. He saw the faded tattoo on Mac's forearm. Spearhead Division. The captain stood up straighter. He didn't handcuff Mac. He nodded. Rough drive, soldier? Road was a little bumpy, sir, Mac replied softly. The news crews arrived within 20 minutes. Helicopters circled overhead. They wanted to interview the hero trucker, who had taken out a cartel hit squad with an 18-wheeler. Kevin was in front of the cameras, animated, reenacting the explosion with wild hand gestures, calling himself a co-pilot. But when the reporters asked to see the driver, the cameras turned to the ambulance where Mac had been sitting. The tailgate was empty. A blanket lay folded neatly on the bench. Mac was gone. He had slipped away into the crowd, blending in with the other stranded motorists, just another gray-bearded man in a sea of faces. He didn't want the glory. He didn't want the fame. He had his own truck to fix, or maybe a new one to find. Mac walked toward the edge of the police line, his thumb hooked in his pocket. He looked back one last time at the battered Peterbilt. It had served him well. The world is full of invisible protectors. Men and women who look like they've been left behind by society, who are mocked for their silence or their trembling hands. But when the road runs out and the darkness closes in, they are the ones who hold the line. They don't do it for the applause. They do it because they are the only ones who can.